Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 539 for the 17th of February 2019. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia, which continues to be warm, bordering on hot, bordering on Coming up on this week's show, I speak to Mark Edward, who is the author of the book Psychic Blues. Now, Mark has recently expanded his book Psychic Blues into an audio edition. New content. Now, Mark is an expert in cold reading and mentalism, the secrets of the psychics, the way that psychics appear to be able to read your mind or chat to the dead. And Mark also has some news about an undercover operation which is just about to see the light of day. Following that, I read from the pages of the Skeptic Magazine, the journal from Australian skeptics, about an investigation into the so-called psychic James Van Praagh. Now, this is just one of the thousands of articles and items and reports you can read for free in the pages of the Skeptic Magazine going back nearly 40 years. I think you'll find this a very interesting report coming up a bit later on in the show. Then we catch up with the Diet Skeptic, Mandy-Lee Noble, who tells us about her recent adventure in becoming an editor for Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia. What is the process she went through? How was it? Was it difficult? And Mandy will tell us about a page she has been working on concerning somebody who has sadly died, called the Wellness Warrior. Now, she was famous for advocating the taking of alternative medicine over conventional medicine for her cancer. Then to round off the show, it's Maynard. Yes, Maynard's back with Maynard's Spooky Action. He's going to be telling us about an upcoming DJ gig he has in Sydney. Because apart from being an ace reporter here on the Skeptic Zone, or a cub reporter, as he likes to call himself, Maynard, of course, is one of Sydney's top DJs. He's going to be doing a gig in the suburb of Glebe, which is near the city centre, coming up in March. Before we get stuck into the show, a quick note from our friends in Victoria. The Surf Coast Skeptic Camp has been postponed, and I will link to the information in this week's show notes, but it will be rescheduled. Have no fear. Surf Coast Skeptic Camp is being postponed for the moment. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. I'm going to run downstairs. Those cats, Henrietta and Maud, they had 2 breakfasts this morning. I gave them some breakfast. They weren't happy. Gave them another breakfast. Lucky mogs. I'm going to run downstairs, have some breakfast for myself. And while I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And joining me now from South Los Angeles, California, the United States, it's Mark Edward. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm very well. It's very good to catch up with you. We do see each other from time to time, normally at conventions and things.
Last time was great in San Francisco. We had a good day. That was a good time.
We certainly did. And it wasn't that long ago. Now, the reason I'm giving you a call over the wonders of the internet is I've been told by a little bird called Susan Gerbeck that you're extending, or you've written more, or you're doing more with your book called Psychic Blues. Now, for people who don't know about that book, can you give us a bit of an overview?
Well, Psychic Blues is my narrative novel that basically tracks a time in my life when I decided I was going to become the world's greatest psychic. But the idea was to infiltrate that market and learn the tricks of the trade, because you can't just go up to a psychic and say, hey, how did you do that? You know, you have to insinuate them and with them. And I my theory was that most psychics don't have the magic background. My background is in magic. So what I did is I basically scammed the scammers. I got these companies thinking that I did the real thing by using mentalist effects. And because my idea was I wanted to climb as far as I could to the top of that slag heap known as the psychic business. And along the way, take lots of notes so that I could one day write this book. So I wrote the book, and it's done fairly well, but it's conflicted. The title, they changed the title to Confessions of a Conflicted Medium because there were parts that were left out of the book that was published. It was not taken from my original manuscript. Well, it was taken from my original manuscript, but it was edited by about a third was taken out.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so a lot of the criticism that I got was because the publisher, Feral House, wanted the main character to be very dark, very unlikable, anti-hero. And I'm afraid that was slightly misunderstood by especially certain people in the skeptic community because they said, that's who I am, right? So I wanted to kind of set the record straight. And another criticism was that it didn't really go into my personal life, what were my relationships like, what inspired me, why did I do this? It was just the bare bones tricks of the trade. So what I did is I reverted to the original manuscript, which was written like 15 years ago, and I read it and narrated it and added in sound effects and music cues and just made a better project out of it. So now it's funnier.
It's funnier, and it's audio, so people can listen to it while they're doing the dishes or jogging or walking the dog or driving in their cars or whatever
That's
they're doing.
Right.
I'm a big fan of podcasts, of course, having been the producer of one, and audio books. So that sounds like a really attractive offering. How's
9
this going?
hours and 4 minutes.
9 hours and 4 minutes. How's this? That's a lot of reading. How's this going to be distributed?
Right now it's on Amazon Audible. Mm-hmm. And they take it over to Europe and around the world. It's kind of it's up to them. I just downloaded it, and now it goes into distribution. And it doesn't go into other languages that I know of yet, but it just got okayed 2 nights ago. So it's hitting the market.
Oh,
and
okay.
I'm really happy with it because it gave me an opportunity to. I did all the voices, the sitters, the agents, the celebrities. I did all the voice impersonations on it. So I had a blast because I was in a real recording studio and I worked with a very patient person, Jackson Church, and we just had a great time doing it. And I had no deadline. I said, I'm not going to hurry through this. I'm just going to do it and have fun. And by this time, I'm so sick of the book, that I think a little bit of my not bitterness, but just, angst kind of came through a little stronger than the first time I read it. The first time I read it, I recorded it with my son. He did it, and we took it to Audible, and the sound quality wasn't good enough. So I had to redo the whole thing. So I figured if I'm going to redo it, I'm going to do it right.
Absolutely, and I, as somebody who does an awful lot of reading, which I do, by that I mean out loud for podcasts, I know how frustrating and lengthy a process it could be because you don't always make it through in one take, of course. You stumble and you get words wrong. You mispronounce things. You put the emphasis wrong. The comma's in the wrong spot. It's right. It's quite a process, isn't it?
Well, it's like the psychics you see on television. The real art of it is the editor.
Good point.
And the guy who was the editor, he just got it, and he made it really, really well done. So, he got all the pauses, and when I wanted to put in little sound cues and stuff, he was very excited about it. So we both had a fun time doing it.
Now, I will put a link for our listeners if they want to download the book. I'll put a link in this week's show notes, and I think it would be a very interesting book to listen to. Now, Mark, some other people might remember you from some years ago now. You were in, I think, the very first episode of Penn and Teller's Bullshit program. That's
right. I was on the pilot episode, Speaking to the Dead.
Yes, I remember watching that in amazement because I hadn't seen anything quite like that before, and of course it was an enjoyable series. What was that like, taking part in that very first episode?
Oh, I loved it because they let me do whatever I want. I got on the plane with the line producer to fly from L.A. to New York, and they said, "How are you going to bust this medium?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? Don't you have a script or anything?" They said, "No. We're going to bring this medium in. She's going to do her thing. Then we're going to have the same audience, and you're going to do your thing, but then you're going to explain that you just made it all up."
Wow.
But along the way, I discovered how the medium that they had hired, I saw exactly what she was doing. She was gathering pre-show from the audience right in front of everybody. And so, of course, when she went into her trance, she suddenly knew who everybody wanted to talk to. And then we found out later that some of the main people who got the biggest hits were friends of her book agent. So she had I think she had 4 people out of the 12 people were being stooges, but they didn't even know it.
Wow, that's fascinating. And how long ago was that? That was 15 years ago?
15 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to remember. It's a classic, of course. I mean, and again, it was the very first episode I saw, and it certainly was an amazement to me to see such naked skepticism on TV. It was quite something.
I know. I love the show, but my in-laws at the time, they thought the language was a little rough.
Oh, well.
They were like, whoa, we liked what you did, but who are those guys? They didn't even know who Penn and Teller were. But yeah, that was a fabulous... I'm afraid I got a little high on my horse after that because the shows I did after that never matched up. A couple of them were pretty good, but that I think was a high point. And I credit that to just being able to improvise and work, in the moment with the crew. And the same thing happened when I went to Norway. We did a TV show there, and everything just went. You couldn't have planned it better, and they basically didn't have a script either.
So you've done some traveling around, and when you do your appearances around the world, is it mostly focused around psychics and cold reading and this sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I decided a couple years back that if it's somebody who wants me to do pure mentalism, I'll do that, which is, again, you just go through the motions of seemingly knowing things and this and that. But for the most part, when I do the skeptical tour, what I'll do is I'll come out and I'll play it in character, and I'll blow everybody away so that they're like, wait a minute. And then the last 10 minutes I say, here's what I did, right? So it has a reveal at the end. And it's been interesting to me to see different places I've gone in the world. People have different reactions to that. In America, they can get pissed off because they feel like they've been manipulated, and they don't like that when you say, hey, we just pulled the wool over your eyes. But when I was in Norway, they thought that was really great. They said, this is what needs to be done for a public service. We need to go out and have people do this and show how easy it is for people to not only be fooled, but fool themselves. All right, so I did a TV show with Jeff Probst, who's a celebrity out here in Hollywood, and he wanted me to teach him to be a reader. So we set up this fake house, and he put makeup on, and he had an earpiece on, and I fed him information that I had backstage, like a lot of psychics do. Like the Peter Popoff thing, if you're familiar with what Randy exposed.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, so we did that for the TV show, and then we did an interview segment in the studio, and after I had explained everything and how terrible it all was, he asked the audience, does anyone have any questions for Mark? And a woman in the back raises her hand and says, I'd like to know how to get a reading from Mark.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, this is what I'm starting to experience is it doesn't matter if you expose it. People just go ahead and believe whatever they want. It's like, no, not my psychic. No, and I've had people say, no, he's really psychic. He's just covering it up. And so it's like really hard. In America, it's been very hard. In Europe, they're much wiser, and probably in Australia too, from what I gather, So that's been the frustrating part is you go through a lot of work, and it really. I did a thing on Ouija boards, and they ended up at the end of for a TV show called Brain Games. Mm-hmm. And after I exposed the Ouija board by putting blindfolds on everybody, more people believed in spirits after that show than before that were in the room. So I don't know what that means. I don't get it, but we keep on. I keep doing it.
Maybe we're all just paid shills for the big psychic industry.
Yeah, or people want to believe so much that they just can't accept it. It's too much for them to handle. So Susan and I are going to have this New York Times article. You heard about that, right?
Well, fill us in as much as you can. It sounds interesting.
Okay, yeah, as much as I can. Susan Gerbic and I and her group of Guerrilla Skeptics did a sting on a medium who will remain unnamed at this point. Uh-huh. And it was incredibly well thought out. The protocol was extremely devious.
All right.
Because we knew we were dealing with somebody who was pretty much a match for any investigator. And we caught this guy out red-handed using Facebook information that we planted on Facebook for him to. We baited the hook with all sorts of things that he turned around and used in his show. So we have the fake Facebook pages on screenshots, and then we have his whole show recorded. So this led to a whole lot of other things, and we found this New York Times reporter who I had worked with before. So it's been a little more than a year we've been waiting for this to come out. And now both of us just had a session with the fact checker last week. So they're saying next Sunday.
Oh, that's interesting.
Next Sunday's New York Times Magazine. Oh, it's so great the way this has happened. I mean, it's taken a long time, but if it goes, it's going to really be something for people to look at and just slap their foreheads,
Well, what a fascinating world that you live in, Mark. It really is. And how can people find out a bit more about what you do, Mark, and maybe get a copy of that audiobook?
So it's www.themarkedward.com is the website. But if you want to get the new audiobook, I'm not selling that at my website. You just go to Amazon or Audible and be sure you put in New Expanded Edition, Psychic Blues New Expanded Edition. Don't get the old one because that's just a book. You want the audiobook.
All right, there's the clue, folks, and I'll put a link in this week's show notes. Well, Mark Edward, again, what a fascinating world you live in, and I hope to see you again in the not-too-distant future.
Thanks for having me, and I'll talk to you again soon.
G'day, this is Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki, proud to be a skeptic, and you can find out more about me at drkarl.com and get lots of free stuff there as well.
As part of our ongoing series of reports and interviews and articles from the Skeptic Magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics, we turn to Winter 2005, Volume 25, Number 2. On page 49, an article by Peter Booth. And at the time of writing, the little blurb says, Peter Booth has just completed a Bachelor of Arts majoring in journalism at Griffith University. He has also studied theatre and magic, which sparked his interest in the topic. And the topic is, as the title says, under the subtitle of investigation, Psychic or just sick? Is there any harm in psychic acts? James Van Praagh says he can talk with the dead. He says he can see into the future. He may even use his powers to search for an answer to the mysterious disappearance of Sunshine Coast teenager Daniel Morecambe. And as an aside, a couple of years ago, the Daniel Morecambe case was resolved. The killer was uncovered, the body was discovered, and that was due to police work. Van Praagh is the latest American television psychic. His television show Beyond airs every weekday afternoon on the 9 Network, and his recent tour of Australia sold out shows across the country. His show at the Brisbane Convention Centre netted almost $250,000 in ticket sales alone. His 3-hour performances consisted of 40 minutes of his life story, 20 minutes of questions from the audience, 30 minutes of guided meditation, and an hour of the supposed psychic readings that have made Van Praagh famous. Almost all audience members who commented on the shows gave a belatedly positive review, thoroughly convinced Van Praagh had made contact with the world of the spirits. However, some skeptics were not impressed. Mark Mayer demonstrates unexplainably paranormal abilities on a daily basis, but Mayer is not a psychic. He's an entertainer, an illusionist, who, as part of his show Talking with the Dead or Lying to the Living at Melbourne's Trade Centre, demonstrates the tricks of the trade he says psychics like James Van Praagh can use to deceive vulnerable people. Mayer attended one of Van Praagh's shows and was disgusted by what he saw. Mayer says, "It made my stomach turn to have to watch it. It was dreadful. The subject matter was just trivialized and thrown away. The real actual pain and grief of the people who were there to get some sort of connection, looking for hope and desperately trying to have closure on their pain, was just washed over in light of entertainment." Mr. Mayer describes what Van Praagh does as, quote, emotional rape, end quote. "It was like watching a woman being physically attacked and not being able to do anything about it." Mayer says there is a general misconception that the psychic industry does no harm. Actually, it does a lot of harm, he says. He describes a woman in the audience at Van Praagh's Melbourne show. In her early 20s, she stood up during the psychic reading and asked Van Praagh if he could contact her daughter, who had died at a young age in a car crash. Van Praagh proceeded to apparently communicate with the deceased young girl, who he said was sitting next to her. The young woman said she was the driver of the car and asked if her daughter forgave her. Quote, "Oranges. Take oranges to her grave. She wants oranges." End quote. Tears were streaming down the woman's face. Later, Van Praagh told the woman her daughter wanted her to know there was nothing to forgive. Mayer says this incident was a typical example of Van Praagh's desecrating of someone's memories of their deceased loved ones. What pain must this woman be in? She should be seeing trained emotional counselors, not someone who is pretending to see her dead daughter. Now she can go away and think, well, that was amazing. Why do I want to stop talking to my daughter now? I'll keep going to psychics forever, for the next 50 or 60 years, and spend thousands and thousands of dollars. He's screwed over their memories and their love. Mayer attributes the apparent psychic gift Van Praagh has to a psychological technique known as cold reading, a combination of making generalized statements, posing questions as statements, and feeding back information he has already been told. Because we are more the same than different, things that seem quite specific and like they only apply to either me or you, actually, in reality, apply to a majority of people. They ask a leading question based on common life experiences to extract specific information, and combine this with things like popular first names, common causes of death or illnesses, and other statistical probabilities. It makes the people feel that the reading is really personal and just for them. Audience members for Van Praag's television tapings are required to sign contracts prohibiting them from speaking to the media about what they saw. However, audience members for his Brisbane Convention Centre show were not required to sign anything, and Shah von Christiansen, who paid $110 for her ticket, was quick to express her disappointment. Most of the people are here today as a result of them having some severe emotional trauma or loss of loved ones, and they're looking for something. I think he's exploiting that. After the show, they were selling blue stars for an intimate meeting for 500 people. They paid $35 a head, and basically what they get for their money is they can shake his hand or he can sign a book for them. I met Lady Diana. I've met Michael Jackson. I've met Elton John. I've met Bill Clinton. Lots of significant people. Not one of them charged to shake their hand. I just find that ridiculous. I think that it's idolizing another human being. They are so desperate to touch this man. So why the need for an audience contract? Mark Mayer suggests that the deceptive editing of the shows may have something to do with it. They take up to 6 hours of taping to produce 11 minutes of airtime. That 11 minutes of airtime is then edited creatively to give the best impression. On top of that, you're allowed to have questionnaires before the audience goes in. You're allowed to have microphones in the audience before the show starts for an hour while they're all chatting amongst themselves. And just to help pad it out, if you get stuck, you're allowed to have actors in the audience. Mayer says people generally do not show the same level of skepticism towards psychic television shows as they do for other media. They're so critical about things, like that band is made up, and this is not real reality TV, and as soon as this comes on, their logic goes out the window. That's a normal emotional response across the board when you are feeling in pain. Other views. Victor Zammit is a Sydney-based lawyer and author of the book A Lawyer Presents the Case for the Afterlife. Zammit is a staunch defender of Van Praag's psychic claims. Zammit says, "The closed-minded skeptics accuse him of fraud, but they cannot prove it. It's closed-minded skepticism." Zammit says a visit to a psychic where he apparently made contact with his deceased father, mother and grandmother changed his views on the subject. "I didn't get along with my father. After half an hour of asking lots and lots of questions to confirm some certain incidents from when he was alive with me, and nobody on earth could know about those, they were 100% correct. I said, 'Okay, what do you want?' And he said, 'I came for forgiveness. I cannot progress in the world that I am in unless you forgive me for being such a lousy father.' I got that, and for me the experiential is far more important than even science." James Van Praag was unavailable to comment on his show, but his manager and producer of Beyond, John King, invited any skeptic to come to their shows and still not believe. "I'm a skeptic myself," King says. "If you see one or two of these things, it's pretty hard to deny that there's something there, even for the biggest cynic or the biggest skeptic." When asked if James Van Praag's claims of psychic powers are fake, King responds, "I produced those shows. I put them together, so I know that those shows are real. I know that there's nothing rigged." Missing people. King says that James Van Praag has previously worked with police departments and the American government and revealed that Van Praag may assist authorities investigating the disappearance of Daniel Morecambe in December last year. "I actually received a newspaper article about that today. It's quite possible that he, Van Praag, may be interested in doing something with that." This is a prospect that Mark Mayer finds particularly disturbing. "The idea of psychic detectives is a myth," he says. "If you look up any police records for anywhere, there's not been a single case of any psychic solving or helping any crime ever. Scotland Yard goes on the record saying they don't use it at all, and it has done nothing. The LAPD goes on record saying they actually did test to see how accurate they were, and they will not use them. The FBI don't have any files on it whatsoever, neither for or against. As soon as a high-profile child goes missing, they, the psychics, prey on it because it's great advertising, and it's absolutely disgusting.
Executive Officer of the Australian Skeptics, Barry Williams, compares claiming to be able to find missing children to the actions of the hoax emailer David Charles Bryan, who was recently arrested for claiming he knew the whereabouts of Daniel Morecambe and demanding money for his return. Williams says,
"If you give police a lead, they have to follow it up. They, psychic detectives, probably convince themselves they're helping the police. It's cruel. I don't give a damn if you are self-deluded in those cases. Your self-delusion is causing pain to somebody else."
Claims by psychics to know the whereabouts of their son have plagued Mr. and Mrs. Morecambe before.
"I've received a few letters from psychics. Some of them have been very distressing,"
Denise Morecambe told Australian Story. And as an aside, Australian Story is a long-running television program on the ABC network.
"They say that Daniel may be in a local barn in the local area close by, or in a country town. I've had one letter saying Daniel's head's been shaved and he hasn't got many days left. Bruce tells me to put them aside and don't look at them. But they do go through my mind. What if it's true?"
No regulation. The psychic industry is not bound by the same regulations as other consumer industries. Mark Mayer believes tougher restrictions should be introduced to monitor the industry.
"If you want to be a psychic, you need no qualifications, you need no history, you don't need to have any police checks, you don't need to prove or substantiate any of your claims,"
he says.
"If people are going to psychics and they want to, I'm not saying they're not allowed to or they shouldn't. If you want to go, you just need to go with the full disclosure that this is entertainment. It's made up and it's fun, and if that's the case, then no problem."
Celebrity psychic John Edward presents the following disclaimer during the credits of his television show Crossing Over. "The materials and opinions presented in this program by John Edward and other third parties, including statements, predictions, documents, photos and video footage, come solely from the respective third-party sources and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the producer and are not meant or intended to be a form of advice, instruction, suggestion, counsel or factual statement in any way whatsoever, and are intended as entertainment." Mark Mayer lodged a complaint with Consumer Affairs in Victoria regarding a lack of such a disclaimer during John Edward's February tour of Australia. He has so far been unsuccessful in his efforts to get authorities to closer investigate psychic claims. Barry Williams said the Australian Skeptics once brought a case to the Department of Fair Trading against a supposed psychic telephone hotline run by the famous Australian psychic, the late Athena Starwoman.
"We had received evidence by planting a stooge in there that people could get a job there with no tests to see if they were psychic, and they were given a script to read and told not to depart from it,"
Williams said.
"They were also told to keep people on the phone as long as they could, and the average was 18 minutes, at $5 a minute. They, the Department of Fair Trading, refused to do anything about it. They said, 'You're getting into the area of people's beliefs.' I said, 'Regardless of whether they believe it or not, the fact is what they were doing is fraud.' But they wouldn't touch it."
Mr. Williams says, despite any evidence that Van Prague cannot really make contact with the afterlife, he and other psychics will continue to prosper.
"The only thing that will bring it down is for the entire humanity to suddenly become critical, rational thinkers,"
he says.
"They're still selling a simple message. They're selling hope, and the rational world is selling you the hard, bloody reality. We've definitely got the harder sell."
Note: this piece was originally written by Peter Booth as an investigative report for a university course entitled, quote,
feature writing, end quote, and later adapted as an audio story for a radio course. The radio version of the story was nominated by the course convener for an Aussie Award for Junior Journalism. And that was Psychic or Just Sick by Peter Booth, and you can find that on page 49 of the Skeptic Magazine, volume 25, number 2, by visiting www.skeptics.com.au and looking for the magazine link. And just getting back to the Daniel Morecambe case, Daniel Morecambe was abducted on the 7th of December 2003 in Queensland on the Sunshine Coast. And it wasn't until August 2011, after an extensive undercover police operation, that Brett Peter Cowan was taken into custody and charged with Morecambe's murder.
Hi, this is Dr. Pamela Gay from Astronomy Cast. Each week, Fraser Kane and I take our listeners on a fact-based journey through the cosmos. With our weekly podcast, we explain not just what we know, but how we know what we know about this universe that we share. Check us out at astronomycast.com and look for us in iTunes, Google Play, and wherever you download podcasts. See you online.
That looks good enough to eat. Or does it? Here's the Diet Skeptic, Mandy-Lee Noble. And joining me now on the line, it's Mandy-Lee Noble. Hello, Mandy-Lee.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's great to be back in Australia, although I think I'm going to be heading stateside in the not-too-distant future, but more about that a bit later on. I thought I'd ring you up, Skype you up, message you up, however we're doing this, because I understand you, apart from your regular Diet Skeptic work, you have been involved with our friend Susan Gerbeck. What can you tell me?
Well, like many people, I have been over the years listening to Susan's reports and on Skeptic Zone and on other podcasts, and thinking I should do some editing and become a Guerrilla Skeptic. And when I was at Skepticon last year, I met two of the great editors, Julie and Harold Berents, and they encouraged me to join along. I was a bit concerned about the training, but they offered some help, and now I'm a graduated editor.
So you are now a graduated Wiki editor.
Guerrilla Skeptic editor, yes.
A Guerrilla Skeptic editor on Wiki. And of course, we run lots of promos for it and people find out about it. So please tell me about the experience of learning how to become an editor.
It was actually really good, and for anyone who's considering it, you learn a lot of skills that you can use in other parts of your work or whatever it is you do, because you learn a lot of a few word processing skills and IT skills, which was quite good. You're mentored on the way, so Susan catches up with you and checks in with how you're going, and the other skeptics will as well, the other editors. Mm-hmm. And so you do a little, lots of little exercises that are examples of what an editor might do on Wikipedia, and along the way you learn the rules. So there's it's sort of a little bit of a rules unto itself type of platform. And once you get that, you sort of have a couple of projects at the end that you do. And I just finished my final project, which is to either do a complete new page of a Wikipedia subject or do a major rewrite.
Wow.
So,
and about roughly how long did all this take until you reached the stage you are now?
Well, for me, probably like most people, it was in a bit of spits and starts. It was like, so it took, I think, the whole process about 3 or 4 months. I would get through quite a few things if I had an afternoon free, and then I'd be, away from it for a couple of weeks, and Susan would be dropping a few hints going, "How are you going?" But they were really, really good and encouraging, and they understand that people have other lives too. And eventually I got to the end, and I was really lucky because when I looked at the project list, there was one that really spoke to me. So, and of course, if you have your own project that you want to do as your final assignment, you can do that as well. But I was just lucky that I went, yep, that's the one for me. And I wrote updated a Wikipedia page. That was a great experience.
Yes, now that's very interesting because in discussions before contacting you, you showed me the page you've been working on, and it's a very important page, I feel, and it's something that people should visit and have a look at. And this revolves around somebody who called themselves, and I use, sadly, the past tense, called themselves the Wellness Warrior. Please tell us more.
Yeah, so when I got the final assignment, because Susan, of course, is over in America, she didn't realise how well-known the Wellness Warrior was in Australia. And the first thing I said to her is, Jessica Ainscough is a household name even now, and that she had a really big impact on Australia. And quite sadly, she passed away in 2015.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really much of there was a couple of outlining comments about her, or sort of points of data about what her story was, but there was definitely some other things to add to it that I thought were really important. And also she's a notable person, so to answer people's questions about her. And I think some of the questions that a lot of people have is, what happens that someone who lives in a country where they have the most amazing medical treatment available to them for free, that they turn their back on that when they need it most. So I really wanted to give a very neutral account of Jessica's life and the impact that she had that made her a notable person and a candidate for a Wikipedia page.
Yes, and again, of course, I say it is sad. I mean, nobody wishes somebody like that to pass away, but she had significant health problems, but it seems that she took the path of alternative medicine and just being well and good, happy thoughts and all this sort of thing. And in her case, sadly, it really didn't work out.
Yeah, and I mean, it was never going to be a really good ending for Jessica. She had a very aggressive cancer, but the odds were in her favour to be alive at the 10-year mark had she taken a conventional medicine, route. But it would have required quite evasive treatment and quite evasive surgery. So with my talking of the story, I just wanted to outline the decisions she made, but also the people who influenced her, because I think that's really important, is to know that there are people out there who are providing information that might lead to people to not to take conventional cancer treatments. So I just wanted to outline, the people that she was listening to at the time. She had a very famous blog that's now deleted, but I was really lucky in that lots of other people quoted directly from her blog. So I was really able to piece together a very full story of what was happening for Jessica at the time. I also wanted to give a good detail of what the outcomes were for her for those choices, and along that quality of life access as well. So a lot of people talk about Jessica's choices in the fact that, maybe she was probably going to eventually die from her cancer anyway, and she mightn't have made that 10-year mark. But I think another important thing to think about with taking alternative choices is the quality of life that they provide. And there's a bit of a mystique that they provide a better quality of life, but that's not always the case. So there's some stuff there about her own reflections and how she was coping with her cancer as it progressed, not having conventional treatment.
It sounds like a fascinating page, Mandy. I'm going to certainly link to the page in question at Wikipedia in this week's show notes. And Mandy, I look forward to many more interesting Diet Skeptic reports coming up in 2019.
Yes, I've been, as you know, Richard, I've been travelling around Australia doing some training for other health professionals in evidence-based nutrition. And along the way, I've been running into quite a few interesting nutritional claims that I've seen. So once I get home and unpack my bags, I'll be pulling up some of those things that I've snapshots with my phone camera while I've been at different places around Australia, and maybe unpack some of those products and their claims about nutrition.
Lots to look forward to in 2019 from Mandy-Lee Noble, the Diet Skeptic. But for now, Mandy-Lee, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Richard, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Aliens are probing people and mutilating cows.
9/11 was an inside job.
Homeopathy cleared up my athlete's foot.
Vaccines cause autism.
Not all psychics are con-artists. Mine is definitely real.
We all have friends and family who believe these things and much more. Well, if you're a rational thinker who is tired of arguing on social media and never getting anywhere, we have a solution for you.
Join the Guerrilla Skepticism and Wikipedia team, and we will teach you how to add reliable scientific and skeptical information to the world's #1 source of information, Wikipedia.
We write new articles and improve existing ones. We remove pseudoscience, paranormal, and alt-med claims, substituting the actual facts. And we operate in many languages.
We've already reached tens of millions of people searching for information, but as you can imagine, we can never do enough.
So please, join us. All you need is a PC, a Facebook account, and the desire to help educate the planet. In fact, you'll be educating the world while you sleep.
Contact us at gsowteam@gmail.com. Guerrilla Skepticism. The time is now.
Music by purpleplanet.com.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, it's certainly good to be back in Australia, and it's good to catch up again with Maynard. Hello, Maynard.
It's great to have you here in the Maynard International Studios Annex.
It is, because I'm glancing over towards the shelf, and amongst the treasures you have, of course, are almost a complete set of Batman figures from the 1960s.
And who else has the novelisation of the original Michael Crichton Westworld movie, the one with Yul Brynner in it?
I saw that just a few months ago. It's actually a really good movie.
Yeah, everyone reckons the series is great, but look, yeah, it can be great, but I haven't got that kind of time.
You know, that was one of the inspirations for the Terminator.
Really? Oh, it wouldn't surprise me there.
Yeah.
Well, Yul Brynner was a lot of inspirations. When I think, I go, what would Yul Brynner in The King and I have done? He would have gone, and all his children would have come out. That's no help at all. That's no help. What do I do in this crisis? Oh, kids, no, that's not going to help. Yeah, no, Yul Brynner and The King and I, don't use that as an inspiration. Just think, what would Batman do?
What would Batman do? But if you do have the chance to see the original Westworld, the movie, that's also got Richard...
I don't know if there's anybody
what's his
else.
name?
No.
Oh, people remember.
But as you can see, look at that. It's got a 32-page... black and white. Oh, Victoria Shaw was in it.
Wait a minute, this will tell us. Keep going. There.
James Brolin.
And
Richard Benjamin, of course, you would all know his great work from, what was that sci-fi?
Quark.
Yes. Quark, he was fantastic. Wow, there you go. James Brolin. Well, I thought the best work he ever did was Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Right.
Paging Mr. Herman.
Now, of course, you've got something coming up relatively soon here in Sydney, which Skeptic Zone fans might like to come along to.
If you're thinking, I want some rushing, flushing, pumping and jumping, you've better be at the Red Bar, which is in Glebe, just up the road from where Tim and I am. Glebe in Glebe Point Rd, 36 Glebe Point Road, for Maynard's Love Shack. Ooh. That's right, Love Shack Baby. I'll be playing a retro night there of music, one night only one night, and if it doesn't go well, there will not be another one. So just don't assume there's going to be another one to go to, because that often is not the case in Sydney. By the way, overseas listeners, Sydney nightlife, not so much these days. Shh, don't. Very pretty city. Can't travel around it by public transport very easily, and you can't go out after 10:30 at night easily either.
No, there's new laws against that, but you can still go to Maynard's Love Shack. Again, this is in Glebe. Where can people find out about this, Maynard?
Look, there's an event. Just look for Maynard's Love Shack on Facebook, or you can go to the Bunga Bunga Facebook page, the Maynard Facebook page.
Or maynard.com.au?
Yes, we will have the details of that up there shortly. And like I said, 16th of March between 8 and 12, and it's only $10. And look, if you fly in from overseas, the Canadian and the American dollar is worth so much here that it could well, it'll well make up for the airfare you had to pay, because $10 is like $2 American or Canadian, isn't it now?
It's well, yes.
And look, I might play you a request. And look, we'll be playing everything. I was just going to play 80s or play 90s. I thought, bugger it. Let's play everything from the later half of the 20th century. So that's right, music from 1951 onwards.
Oh, wow. That's
so, and I might even play some Andrews Sisters as well. So who knows what could go on that night.
There's not enough Andrews Sisters being played anymore.
And I will be screening Raquel Welch and Anne Margaret videos on the big screen. Not the sound, just the video there. So if you've got some dance moves, you're lacking the dance moves, you can just copy theirs.
Come along to Maynard's Love Shack. And what was that date again?
That's the 16th of March between 8 and 12. It's only $10. Come on. And the place only holds 50 people. So we haven't got big expectations. As long as we get over 7, it'll kind of look busy as long as our moves around a lot.
And the link, of course, on this week's show notes.
Great. Okay, see you there, people. And look, what I said about requests, look, whatever you like.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now here's a note for people in California, in the San Francisco area, the Bay Area. I'm scheduled to give a talk for the Bay Area Skeptics on the 14th of March. Details will appear as soon as I get them to hand. But the Bay Area Skeptics, friends of the Skeptic Zone and personal friends of mine for many years now, and I'll be speaking about Australia's psychic detectives. Coming up probably in Berkeley. I think that's where they normally have those Bay Area Skeptics meetings. So keep an eye out on that for the 14th of March. Thank you to my new Patreons. Some people recently have come on board for $5 a month, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. It really helps put the show out in your ears. And for the technically minded these days, 99% of the show, indeed when I'm traveling, and 100% of the show is edited and produced on iDevices, on iPad and iPhone. When I'm here back in the studio, I'm using a different microphone, but on the run in the field, as it were, I can use iDevices with an attachment, a Zoom mic attachment. Sometimes the microphone in the iPhone is good enough for field reports, and all the editing, sound mixing is done on the iPad using a application called Ferrite, which I found to be very, very good. Indeed, I'm tempted to take this microphone I'm using at the moment, which is a Sennheiser shotgun microphone, out on the field with me too. But for this week, I've just beaten the planes coming over. Hang on. Open the window to the studio. It's always a race against the unknown here, because I live not far from the airport, and every now and then when I'm doing a voiceover or a recording, I have to stop every 3 minutes for A380s and 777s, and I don't know what that one is. Are the planes flying overhead? This is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to the people who listen on after the music. This week we're going to be playing the dice game. For those of you new, every week or every other week, I roll a 10-sided die and see if you can use your predicting powers to predict what numbers will come up. This week I'm going to use one of my other dice. It's a 30-sided one, a 30-sided die, which I picked up at... Actually, I think I picked this one up at Games in Berkeley, or was it DragonCon many years ago? I've got a 60-sided one here too, but I think that's a little bit extravagant for today. So I'm going to roll it 3 times, and we'll see if you can use your predicting power to guess a number from 0. No, from 1, in fact, from 1 to 30. So here we go. I'm going to roll the dice, give it a go, or the die, and... this week's first number is 28. 28. So use your predicting power again. A good shake, and it's come to rest on number 23. How's your predicting going? Are you psychic? One more number. Predict away. Here it comes. Rolling, rolling, rolling. Oh, and it stopped on number 9. So this week's numbers are 28, 23, and 9. I wonder where those cats are.